Being a business owner is hard. There's always something new to learn, and there's never enough hours in the day. I'm Rebecca, and even after being a business owner for 10 years, I'm still learning something new every single day. That's why I love talking with other business owners to hear how they do it, what works, and what doesn't work. Today, I'm chatting with Keith. He's a third generation business owner who bought his family's business from his dad. He shares exactly what the transition looked like from managing employees who were much older than him to surviving COVID with a business and working every day to keep his family's legacy alive. It turns out passing a business down to the next generation does not have to be complicated, emotional, or scary if you focus on the right things. Let's dive in and see what we can learn from Keith's story.
My name's Keith. I run a small manufacturing and distribution business here in the Midwest. We are in a very niche industry. It's a very unique business.
So tell us how you ended up being a business owner.
Well, as these things go, it was a family business. I'm third generation, and everybody's heard the cliche about the third generation owner of a family business and what usually happens with it. So you're under a lot of pressure right from the start to make it all work. But um, yes, I was very fortunate. I've been very fortunate in life in general, and everybody thinks everything is given to you in a lot of these regards, but that wasn't the case here. I was involved with the family business. Like I say, I was mostly lucky enough to get involved right out of college when I was 22 years old. Jumped right from college into running this business, and it was very exciting. And I've learned quite a bit very quickly, but we can talk about that later. The short version is that I started running the business in 1991. And then I actually purchased it outright from my family in 2009. So ran it for quite a while. I wish I would have done that sooner. I wish I would have purchased it much sooner. But purchased it in 2009 at the height or the low point of the giant crash in 2009. Seemed like a great time to buy a business. And so I've owned it ever since 2009, going on 15 years now, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, so third generation owner of a family business.
So, growing up as a kid, did you always know that eventually you would take over and run the family business? Or was it in your head like, do I want to do this? Maybe I want to go do something different.
No, there was no question in my mind what I wanted to do, and it's what I still want to do. And it's something that it's type of business that is very easy to get excited about and be really excited about the product that we build and a lot of the people that we work with. And so when I was a kid, that was my dream, was like life couldn't be any better than running this business, and I really looked forward to that day. And then, be careful what you wish for, as they say, because that's the way things played out. And sure enough, I was running the business at some point, and it's like, whoa, this is a little bit more complicated than I thought it was going to be. And it's not all fun all the time. So, but no, been very fortunate again. And this was something that I always wanted to do. Can't believe that I've been able to enjoy a life of doing something I love so much.
So, your grandfather started it.
That's correct. My grandfather started the business in 1964 or a little bit earlier. And he was very active in it up until the early 1970s. Then my father became very active in it until the late 70s, early 80s. And then we had some outside managers outside the family running the business up until 1991 when I got involved and took it over full time.
So, were you alive when did you watch as a kid the process of your dad taking it over from your grandfather and that transition, or was that way before your time?
Well, I was alive. Yes. I'm not sure that that was really on my radar when I was like 3 or 4. So, but yeah, I got to see my dad's involvement. Certainly, I wasn't really aware of what was involved in the transition with him running the business and things like that. But I did get to see how he ran the business and how involved he was, because the first thing I learned was like, you never stop. It's not a 9 to 5 job owning a business like this or owning any business. You would oftentimes come home from work and then continue to work at home in different ways. Or he'd come home from work, grab dinner, and then go right back to work, and then come home again at midnight and turn around and do the thing all over again the next day. Um, it just never stops when you're a small business owner.
What was it like when you got out of college and started working in the business while your dad still owned it? Was that an interesting dynamic, or was it smooth and everyone kind of knew their place, or was it did you have the conversations ahead of time that needed to be had to where it was smooth?
Well, it was smooth in some ways, and almost regrettably smooth because um, I think because of my father's experience with his father, um, my father was very hands off. And he also, at this point, he was running another part of the family business that was quite a bit larger and quite a bit more complex. And so that really consumed all of his time. And he really didn't have time to be involved in this side of the business. So it was quite literally a case of, you know, graduate from school, move home, and boom, go to work on Monday. And here, you're in charge. Let me know if you have a problem. And, kind of sent me on my way. And without a lot of guidance, he was always there if I needed him. There was never a question about that. But sometimes, expectations weren't necessarily very clear and things like that. And so I was left to kind of find my way on my own. And when you're young and freshly out of school, you think you're pretty smart. You just spent 4 years of your life in college, and you think you've got all the answers. And then when you come back and get involved in this business that's been established for, roughly 20 years at that point, with some employees, or actually 25, 30 years at that point, and with some employees that had been there for 20 to 25, 30 years, all of a sudden you walk in the door and you've got all the answers to everything. It doesn't always go super smoothly. And I think that feeds into one of the other questions you may want to bring up. And, you know, are there things I wish I would have done differently? And certainly the most obvious, and it's something that everybody tells you in business school, is never go to work for the family business directly out of school. And that's what I did. Hindsight being what it is, um, I really wish I would have taken a year to go work maybe in an unrelated industry, obviously an unrelated business, but work for somebody else. So you get that real world experience outside of what you've already seen. Because when you're raised in that family business, you already know how it's sort of done there, and you don't see how things are done elsewhere. So um, you don't have sort of a fully formed worldview when it comes to operations and things like that. So that's the one thing I really wish I would have done differently, was take a year or more even and sort of go see the world through another business's eyes.
What'd you go to school for?
Very interesting. I originally went to school to be a manufacturing engineer. And to be frank, the weed out classes that they put you through early on were very effective and pretty much weeded me out. And I convinced myself that if I'm a really good manager, I can always hire a good engineer. So I switched majors and became a business management major early on in school. And that was probably the right move for me.
Do you feel like you learned a lot through that business management degree that was applicable into the business?
That's a really good question. There's a real distinction between book knowledge and school taught knowledge, or however you want to refer to it, and gained or learned real world knowledge. Those are two radically different things as far as I'm concerned. Did the 4+ years I spent in school, did they fully prepare me for what I was about to face as running a small business, which at the time we had 12 employees when I took over, and it was a union shop. So that was a real challenge. I mean, there's a lot of things that I still retain, I think, from my years in school, but there's just so much more that you learn, that there's so much more that you can't learn in school, and that you have to just sort of be eyes wide open all the time and just be a giant sponge once you get out of school. To me, there's just no substitute for like life lessons. And I mean, I'm not the type of person that can read a book and go, okay, well, this is how you do it because I just read this book. I have to see it and experience it myself to really understand it. And so that's one of the great things about trying things and failing at things, you learn from it. So you just kind of figure it out on your own in a lot of cases. And to me, that's just the most effective thing you can.
So talk to me about coming in straight out of college and then being in charge of union employees who've been there for maybe not all of them have been there for longer than you'd been alive, but
They
had
have
been
in
there.
some cases. Yeah, they really had. And that
And
was,
then you come in telling them what to do. How was that transition? What did you learn? What do you wish you would have done different?
I wish I would have done it all differently. It's so hard because again, you don't know. You think you know because this is what they told you in school. And you think, again, you read the book and you went to the class and you listened to the lecture. And then you get there and you're dealing with real world situations, some of which can be very difficult. And now you're a 22-year-old kid trying to tell a 50-year-old employee that's been in that business for 25 years how you want something done. um, it's very difficult. And it was very difficult for me to do that effectively. Hindsight and age are two great things. It's really easy to look back and go, I should have done all that much differently. But at the time, you just don't know. You really don't know. And some people figure it out more quickly than others. But I would say never underestimate the importance of communication, communicating things clearly with all of your staff, with everybody, all of your coworkers. I mean, if you don't communicate, and I'm still guilty of this today, that's the hardest, for me, that's the hardest thing you do is communicating effectively with staff and coworkers. It's just difficult to do, and it leads to sort of the root of all issues, really. And if you don't communicate goals and expectations clearly, people don't know what you expect. But dealing with a union shop when you're a 22-year-old kid right out of school, not something I would recommend for everybody, but that's what I did and managed to survive.
So now where you're at, do you hands-on manage all your employees, or do you have managers set up throughout where you just kind of handle the top tier people and they manage the people under them?
Well, on a smaller scale, I mean, I think you're envisioning like, lots of employees. Right now, we're definitely smaller than we used to be for a variety of reasons. Um, but yes, I have a person that sort of runs the daily operations for me, and I try to focus on, the big picture items, which is always tough.
So when you took over, but your dad still owned the business, what was it like negotiating what your pay would be? Like, did you just get a percentage of what you were able to bring in, or did you and your dad have to sit down with a desk between you and negotiate a salary?
Uh, it just sort of happened. And that's the way it kind of goes in my family. Communication has never been our strong point. So, no, there was never a lot of negotiations. I always felt like I was treated fairly, and there were times where I felt like, you know, hey, it would be nice if I could get some more money here. It was always fine. It always worked out, but there was never a clear cut path. There was never a straightforward path there. And that's something that you have to be a very disciplined person, very organized person with a clear set of goals, um, would have all of that dialed in to where, okay, on December 1st, we sit down and you, as my father slash owner, are going to evaluate my job and the job I've done over the last 12 months. And we're going to talk about all the things that were good and all the things that weren't so good and the areas that we need to improve upon, and tell me what next year looks like financially and what your expectations are. That's how that all should have played out. Um, but for whatever reasons, in spite of having a great relationship with my father and entire family, it was just always difficult for us to communicate about business. And that,
I think that's normal.
for me, it was normal. It's uncomfortable. It's just sort of an uncomfortable conversation to have anyway. Having it with a family member makes it even more uncomfortable. Yeah, it's difficult, and that's one of the things that I wish I was better at.
So you knew your end goal was to always own the business. I guess you probably had three options, like one, I buy it now, two, I buy it later, or three, do I wait until the previous generation passes away and hopefully I inherit it? Like, did you kind of have three options that you had?
I wouldn't say it was really necessarily three options. I mean, I think the larger business, the parent business at the time, was at a point where they wanted to focus more on their operations, and I think a lot of people there felt like the business that I was running was a bit of a distraction for that larger business. So I think there was some pressure to either, you know, sell the sell my what ended up being my business, sell it outright to whoever, or sell it to a family member. I don't want to say it was forced or anything like that, but it actually started on their end. They were kind of like, hey, how can we make this work? And then we had some outside advisors come in and say, look, this is what this could look like. And and it all worked out and we made it work out in a really crazy financial time. And I'm not sure I really knew what I was getting into. I mean, if you remember 2009, I mean, the economy was crashing in a massive way in the industry that I'm involved with and my business is involved with. The industry was halved in that period, 2009, 2008 to late 2009, 2010. Our business was cut in half. I love the business and love being involved in it so much. I'm like, yeah, let's buy this. Now's the time. Let's go. I don't want to see this, get away from me. So convince my wife that this is a great thing to do and we should do it. And she's been really supportive. And she says, okay, if you think this is what we need to do, let's do it. And so we did. And we dove right in. Crazy time.
Did the advisors that you guys brought in, which is very smart to do, did they do a business valuation and that kind of determined what the purchase price was going to be?
I would say, yes, there was a business valuation, but not completely objective. I think there was like, well, look, this is what we can do to make it work. This is how we can make it all work. So I probably paid more than I wanted to pay for it, and they probably got less than they wanted to get for it. But in the end, it worked out. And it's just so hard to have a very disconnected arm's length transaction on something like that when it's family, and today you're buying the business from him or them, and tonight you're having dinner and celebrating somebody's birthday. I mean, it's very difficult to draw that distinction and separate family from business.
Did you get a loan to make the purchase, or did you figure out some sort of repayment from profit? They hold the note financing option.
No, it required outside financing, or I utilized outside financing.
Was that hard to get in 2009?
It wasn't easy, and we went through several banks before one of the advisors, who, is involved in these things sort of all the time, brought the deal to one of his sort of friendly bankers, and then we got it worked out, and I'm still with that bank today. And they are great. Wouldn't trade them for the world. Have a great relationship with them. Absolutely love them. And that is one of the things I would stress to you and your audience is, certainly for a young entrepreneur, there is no substitute for having a good relationship with your banker and letting them know how much you love them on a daily basis. Because, I had to go through COVID as a business owner, and that was a really crazy time, as so many people know. And my banker, though, was an absolute lifeline. She was amazing. She was the reason I was able to sleep at night. Not only do you need a good relationship with your banker, but that's just one of the fundamental things for a young entrepreneur or any business person. And that's just maintaining and managing relationships as you go through life. You never know, this person that you met last weekend at your kid's soccer game or wherever, or had some small business transaction with, you never know what ultimately that person is involved with or how they can help you at a later time or what kind of business they may steer your way at a later time. And as a young person, when I was fresh out of school and trying to not trying to figure it all out, I knew I had it all figured out, but I didn't pay enough attention to things like that because you don't know. And so there was a lot of missed opportunities where I met some really great people, but didn't sort of optimize the relationship, and didn't maintain that relationship over time. And that's something I really value now as I'm older is, are those relationships that you pick up. And when you get to be my age, and it's really nice to be able to pick up the phone or know that you can pick up the phone and call this person to talk about this specific problem you're having, and you sort of build this network of supporters, and that's just really critical. I think it's invaluable. It's absolutely invaluable. I mean, because you can't back in the day, you'd open a phone book and call somebody or whatever. Now you go online, of course, but it's just not effective. I mean, having a relationship with someone where you can just pick up the phone and go, hey, this just happened and I'm stuck, what direction would you go? And that's invaluable. So you never want to cast aside a relationship or not pay attention to a relationship as much as you should. Managing relationships, I mean, to me, that's one of the biggest things you can do as a young entrepreneur, success in the future.
When I was in college, I had a friend who her parents said, "You will join a sorority. We don't care about your grades. All we care about is the networking that you do through your sorority because that networking will take you much farther in life than A's and B's on your test." And I was like, "Whoa." I mean, my parents were the exact opposite. They were like straight A's, nothing else. So when I heard her say that, I was like, my mind was blown. I had never heard anyone say something like that before, but she's probably made it farther than any of us have. Who knows?
Perhaps there's a happy medium. Um, I think that is good advice. I mean, I don't want to say you should blow off school entirely in favor of your sorority or fraternity, but it is good advice. I mean, the relationships that you make early on, if you can maintain those over the years, they will pay off for sure. It's just no question about it.
So going back to getting the loan to purchase the business, were you able to find a bank that would use the business as collateral, or did you have to sign over personal assets as your collateral guarantor, personally guarantee it all? Was it terrifying to sign something like that?
Yes and yes. And all of the above. Yeah. When you deal with a bank, they're going to want all of those things. So yes, I signed all of those things and it was terrifying. And it's certainly a motivator that will keep you focused and keep you working hard to get to the point where you don't have to sign all those things, or at least not as often. But yeah, so you should expect to do that. There's other sources of capital out there, of course, and now there's so much generational wealth and family wealth out there that I think it's much easier today. Not that it's easy by any stretch, but I think, a source of funding can always be a family member, family friend, or somebody that, yeah, again, a family friend, somebody that your parents know. They may have an interest in the business you're trying to get off the ground. I think that happens more frequently today than it did 30 years ago, 20 years ago. But yes, be prepared to sign everything um, when you get to the bank.
If you were talking to a young person who is trying to find a loan to get their business off the ground, option A is a backed bank loan where they have to put their house as collateral, or option two is an unsecured, different type of investor at a much higher interest rate. What do you think's better?
Well, I think it's situational. There's pros and cons to both. I think having a relationship with the bank and establishing that relationship with your bank early on is going to set you up for success over the years, well into the future. The bank isn't going to call you and say, this is how you need to run your business and this is what I think you should do. They're just going to want to see the statements at the end of the year or quarterly or whatever. An outside investor, family friend, that's more of a partner situation, I think. And they're going to feel somewhat entitled to call you and say, hey, we think you should be doing this when they really have no idea what's going on in your business. And so I think it can get a bit stickier there. So there might be a lot more hoops to jump through with the bank and a lot more hurdles to clear, but it's ultimately more straightforward. And I think certainly more hands off, in my experience anyway. They're going to let you do what you do best, and that's run the business.
You buy the business, you're in charge now. Then how do you figure out what to pay yourself? Because then you get to pay yourself whatever you want. Like, where did you find the line of what do I pay myself versus what do I keep in the business as cash reserves? What do I
Let me correct you. You just said you get to pay yourself whatever you want. That is not exactly true. That's not how it really works. You get to pay everybody else first. And at the end of the day, if there's something left over, then you get to pay yourself. Um, but it's a real point of pride for a business owner, I think, after many years to say that you never stiffed a supplier, you never missed a payroll. All of those things are something to be proud of, I think, as a business owner, because there's so many things always coming at you. But there is a person that probably didn't get paid along the way, and that's you. There's certainly times when you take a back seat to everybody else. You're the lowest priority. Um, that's the reality of it. And I think it is smart, however, to set a floor and say, look, even if you have to set up like an automatic withdrawal thing to where it gets transferred to your personal account on a weekly basis or whatever, this is what I'm taking out of here. Because what happens, I think, for a lot of small business owners is, yes, here's how you should run the business. And you should set goals and expectations, and you have a financial plan that you're going to work towards. That's great. And if you can run your business that way, more power to you. You're going to be ultra successful and you're going to do great. The reality is, it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to deal with all of the things you have to deal with as a small business owner and do all of that planning and stick to it and really work hard to achieve the goals you set out. It can be done. People do it all the time, but I think I'm speaking for the majority of people out there in the real world that, you know, every day is a battle. You just don't know what's going to hit you between the eyes. The great Mike Tyson line is, everybody has a plan until they get punched between the eyes. Well, that's what happens when you walk into your small business on a daily basis. You get punched between the eyes and you don't see it coming. What I think a lot of small business owners end up doing, sort of unknowingly or unwittingly, whatever you want to call it, you kind of run the business off the checkbook. You go, oh, okay, hey, there's more money in the account at the end of the month. We must be doing okay. And it's really hard to take the time to carve out the time and sit down and review financials every month or even every quarter. It's just really hard to do that. It's just sort of works out to, you pay yourself what you can afford to pay yourself. But again, I think there should be a floor. I think every business owner should say, at minimum, like if I can't make it work where I'm taking this much out of the business on a weekly basis, then we shouldn't be doing this. And we should be going to work somewhere else or something. Because if you can't get a bare minimum return out of your business, you don't want to get to the point of where you're just doing it every day just to pay everybody else and not yourself.
and you've owned this through the highest of the highs and probably the lowest of the lows. If you bought in 2009 and you went through COVID, you've had every end of the spectrum on is it good or is it bad? I mean, I remember in COVID, you thought the whole industry was shutting down and that was it, business is over, but probably ended up being probably one of the best years you've had the next year or two, probably,
Yeah,
maybe.
COVID was a crazy time, and again, could not have done it without the relationship we had with our bank. We would not be here today if it wasn't for that relationship that we had with the bank. And yeah, so yes, everything crashed in February and March, if I remember correctly, and it was like, oh geez, we're done. What do we all do now? Like, you just didn't know. I mean, this was all new territory for everybody, and there was no place to sell our product into. Everything stopped sort of overnight. And I think that first month, I think maybe it was March or April, we were off like 60% from the year before. And that's a pretty big number. Every day is full on sort of panic, but you start seeing signs of life, and the phone kept ringing and we kept sort of sending stuff out the door, but on a much slower basis. And And then we got like 2 months into it, and it's like, hey, we're kind of busy again. And I would say by July of the first year, we were back to flat out. And the product that we're involved with, we were fortunate enough that we're, um, again, a real niche business that is more or less sort of under the radar. I wasn't trying to sell something in a major league stadium with 50,000 people, with a lot of cameras on it. It turns out that this business that I'm involved in, again, was kind of under the radar. It was something that mostly happens outdoors, and it's something that a lot of people do as a hobby and in their spare time. People really looked inward, and they had a lot of time on their hands. So this is something that they could be involved with from their home, participate with their family outside. 2020, I think we ended up essentially flat from the year before, which I was thrilled with during COVID. And then 2021, we're actually up as people started emerging from COVID and wanting to spend money. I think a lot of businesses jokingly say occasionally that, we could use another COVID, but with less sickness and death. I mean, that is really bad part of it, obviously. But from my business anyway, we came out of it much better.
How is it managing staff through the booming times and the slow times? Like, is your current staff or your normal staff amount, are they able to scale up and be more productive in the busy times? Or when it's busy, do you have to hire more people, and then when it slows down, lay people off?
So I don't believe I've ever laid anybody off. We've lost people through natural attrition, things like that. But I don't think I've ever laid anybody off. 15 years I've owned the business anyway. Um, it was a little bit different situation when I was running the business. We would move people back and forth from the parent company and the smaller company early on. Um, but the people I have are great, and they can sort of scale up and then also scale down. I try to be as flexible as I can with our employees, kind of let them sort of set their own hours to a degree, and just try to give them the flexibility. We're a small business. We don't have a lot of benefits. So one of the quote unquote benefits I try to offer is, like, I try to be as flexible as I can with them. And they're great. If there's a week where we've got an event coming up that we need to prepare a lot of equipment for, everybody will work butts off to make sure it all gets done and make sure it gets done right. And kind of knowing that, okay, 2 weeks from now, we've got a little bit of a lull, and I don't want to say they go back to cruise control, but they can kind of go back to working at a not crazy pace. If you have really great people working for you, they will step up and get the job done when it comes time to. And as long as you take care of them in the slow times too, I think they appreciate that. And we'll always work with you.
Do you prefer to pay employees hourly or salary?
That is another really good question. And I will say at this time, all of our employees are hourly. That's not necessarily the best way, I would say, but that is one of the other things that's very difficult to manage, is how to pay people, what to pay people, how to be competitive in the marketplace, what their expectations are in terms of pay. And that's just, that's one of those things that you need to work really hard at to be good, and not, I have to say. And it's something that a small business owner needs to really spend more time on than they think they should.
I guess in a way, it's probably nice coming into a family business because a lot of that stuff is already set up and structured, and the people already have a signed contract. So you kind of step in and then just adjust as time goes on versus creating it all from scratch.
Yes, I was fortunate in that regard, that I stepped into an ongoing, well-established business. And so I didn't have to figure that out on the fly. That was all already in place when I got involved. But early on in my business ownership life, you were always trying to pay people as little as possible. What I learned that they don't teach you in school is that that's not necessarily a really good idea, because as the saying goes, you get what you pay for. And so, yeah, I've got a guy that would come in and do the work and I could pay him a low rate. And I thought I was doing well because I had this guy doing the work over there and I wasn't paying him much. But he was maybe I wasn't paying him a lot, but he was costing me a lot because the quality of his work was not as good as it should have been, which led to dissatisfied customers, which led to product returns, or additional costs associated with repairing product after the fact, things like that. So, at first glance, you think, hey, I'm getting a deal over here with this guy. I'm getting this guy's working really cheap for me. The reality of the situation is that maybe you think you're getting off easy and not paying them well, but they're costing you a lot and it's costing your business a lot. So tried to get more aggressive and start paying people more and started attracting a higher level of employee. And I'm like, oh, hey, this works better, So I would say to anyone, don't focus on how little you can pay someone. Focus on what that employee costs you versus what the return is. And that's really where I think the focus should lie, is not how little I can pay this person. I mean, look at the fast food industry. Like, how little can we pay these people? It's very rare that I even walk into a fast food restaurant anymore. I walk in there and don't want to be here. I don't want anything that's produced here. That's the mentality of a lot of these places. Like, how little can we get away with paying these people? And you get what you pay for.
When you look back at your business, the best years versus the worst years, or the years that you've had increased revenue, are you able to pinpoint anything like, oh yeah, this year was better because I did marketing differently that year, or I had a connection that evolved that brought in a lot more money? Like, are you able to kind of pinpoint and track the good versus the bad to create a pattern moving forward of things to do or not to do? Or is it so industry specific related that it's kind of out of your control and just how the economy is?
Well, I would say it's never out of your control. I mean, there's so many factors that you do control, or you should control, or have at least some input in. So you're not just sort of an innocent bystander and, things are happening around you. You've got plenty of control. But I would say that my specific industry and our business is it's steady. It's very steady. There's not a lot of peaks and valleys. There's a band like that. And the business and the industry over time sort of operate within that band. There's never a giant peak and there's never a giant valley. It's always sort of right in that band. And so you're constantly making adjustments. Really easy to say we should do this or we should do that. And it's hard to do some of those things for a variety of reasons. And I was talking with a friend of mine not too long ago and sort of lamenting the fact that I couldn't sort of do things the way I wanted to, and I was struggling to get this done and struggling to get that done. And she just looked at me and said, "Why don't you just do it? You're the guy in charge. Just fix it." I love that she distilled it down to something that simple. And I stood there for a second. I'm like, yeah, well, why don't I just go fix that or do it the way that I'm saying I want it done? And again, the reality is it's not that easy. Yeah, I'm sorry, I strayed from your question there a little bit, but um,
No, but that's a good point because I mean, we talk about that too all the time. Like anything that goes wrong in the business or that we don't like really goes back to us. Like if there's an employee that's not doing what they're supposed to do or that we don't
yeah,
like or whatever, it comes back to us. Either we're being a bad manager and a bad leader, or two, it was a bad hire, and which comes back to us. Like we messed up somewhere. We can't just point the finger. So if we want to fix it, we have to do something different. Like, you shouldn't be driving to your own business that you own and you make all the decisions on, frustrated as to what goes on inside the doors. Like, you're in full control.
yeah. I mean, and again, it sounds easy, right? You're in full control. Just fix it. My grandfather had a little sign on his desk um, many, many years ago, and it said, "The buck stops here." And that was the saying, right? I mean, he was at the end of the day, he hired all these people. He's the one that put all these things in place. And if there's something that's going sideways or something that someone's not happy with or a success that the company is enjoying, the buck stops with him. And as a small business owner, The buck stops with you, and you can complain about it all you want, which isn't going to fix it, but you're the one that is enabled and empowered to fix it. So it's my favorite saying is hope is not a strategy. So talking about it with someone else, hoping that that's going to fix it, it's not going to happen. So you have to be disciplined, focused, and sort of have that take charge attitude. It's one of the things that I wanted to make clear in our discussion is it's really easy to talk about how things should be done and what you want to do and here's our goals and all that. The implementation and execution, that's, to use another old phrase, that's where the rubber hits the road. I mean, it's really easy to say, oh yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and I think we can do this, and I'm guilty of that myself. At the end of the day, though, you've got to put all that into action, and you can't do it yourself. That's another thing that I think you have to talk about in these conversations is that the typical small business owner is just like, yeah, I'll just do it myself. I don't want to try to explain it to anybody else. I'm just going to do it myself. Well, pretty soon you find that you're doing everything yourself and everybody else is kind of sitting around looking at you going, hey, what do you want us to do? So you have to become very good at delegating and communicating. And you can never be too good at delegating and communicating. Something you have to work on every day, something I've certainly not mastered. I'll be the first to tell you that, but you can't execute all of these plans in a vacuum. It has to come with your team. It has to come, whether it's one person, 10 people, or 100 people. They have to understand what you're trying to do. They have to understand why you're trying to do it. And if you want them to help in the execution of your vision, um, they have to buy in. And so you have to communicate with them. So you can't do it alone. It takes everybody involved to buy in and make it happen.
As a leader, how do you get people to buy into your vision to want more for the company and more for the business than just going in and collecting a paycheck?
Yeah, that's where the magic is, right? Because there's people out there that have a lot of charisma, and I work with a lot of athletes, sort of, and I always tell them part of your job as an athlete is you have to be able to motivate everybody around you to be working for you and working for what you want to achieve. And that's the same with a small bit, any business, small, medium, or large. The leader has to be able to motivate the troops, motivate the team, motivate the employees. Some people, it comes naturally to. I mean, there's certain people that walk through a door and you just know if you're sitting in a room and sometimes somebody will just walk into a room full of 20 people and you can just look at that person and go, I don't know who that is, and I don't know what their story is, but that's the one. That person can just walk in and strike up a conversation, and pretty soon people are gravitating towards that person. They've got that charisma, or as I think you kids call it, the riz or something like that these days. I don't even know. But they have that, and it comes naturally. You can't teach that. So those people are born with an advantage over the rest of us mere mortals that are trying to figure it all out. Those people are amazing and worth whatever you can pay them. So for the rest of us mere mortals, we have to work extra hard to communicate our goals and visions with our team. And if you do a good job of that and they understand what their role is in helping you achieve that, man, they're all in.
So, looking back, what advice would you give to people? What would be some advice that you would give to someone wanting to get started in a business or looking at buying a business or just trying to get started? What's something that you've learned over the past years that you wish you had learned sooner?
All of the
All of those
above.
things.
Yeah, all of it. Um, never underestimate the value of relationships, personal relationships. Never underestimate the value of personal relationships, whether if it's with your mail carrier, your banker, the UPS driver. Don't underestimate any of them. Number two, communicate. You can never communicate too much, and you're never going to be good enough at communicating. You can't be too good. I mean, you can't. It's just not something you can be too good at. And then after that, follow your passion. If there's something that you're passionate about and you love doing, you know, that's something you should pursue. because I've been very fortunate and very lucky that I've been able to enjoy going to work every day, doing something that I really love and love a lot of the people that are involved with it. It I don't know what else I would be doing if I wasn't doing this. It would be tough to just sort of have a 9 to 5 job. That's and one other thing I just wanted to mention, I was thinking about this the other day. When you're all in your business, my wife and I just randomly, for whatever reason, ended up at home one day at like 5 o'clock. We both ended up at home, like we both, for some reason, left work at 5 o'clock, and we were both home at 5:15. And we were literally like looking at each other like, so what do we do? Because we normally get home at 6:30, quarter to 7, 7, grab dinner, eat dinner, sort of go back to work at home. And this was just a random time. And we're like, wow, this is how the rest of the world sort of lives. They come home from work at 5:15. They're like, we're done. We're going to go play tennis, or we're going to walk around. And I don't know what people do because we've never done it. So I think that speaks to the work-life balance sort of topic that you wanted to talk about. And again, the people that can do that, I think ultimately are more successful, that find that work-life balance. I think it is worthwhile to put that effort in to try to.
It's definitely a hard line to find because in one sense you want the best for your business. So if you get a call at 11 o'clock
Yeah.
from a supplier, you got to take it. Or other people, nope, after 7:30, business is off, family's on. It can wait till the next morning. I mean, I've talked to the extremes of the extremes on that, and I guess it just comes down to the individual and what works for you and your business and your family, I guess.
I think you're
But
right. I think it's an
but it's hard to
individual
figure it
thing.
out.
It's very hard to figure out, and it's very hard to have that line, that says, okay, after 6 o'clock, my phone's off, because what if it is a customer that says, hey, I got to have this shipped tomorrow? And you're just saying, nope, I don't take those calls until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and it's too late at that point or whatever. So yeah, that's tough. And I admire the people that have figured it out.
I wonder if people really have ever figured it out.
Yeah. Well, maybe they haven't figured it out, but some are definitely better than others at it.
Yes. Is there anything else? Let's see. I think we've covered a lot. Is there anything else you think?
I mean, it could be an endless conversation when you're talking about, how to succeed in small business. And I would just say that small business owners are probably underappreciated by people that have never owned a small business. And a small business being 50 employees or less, I guess. The sacrifices that the small business owner has to make, the stress that they go through, it's all supposed to be worth it in the end with the rewards. And sometimes it works out that way, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's a challenge, And so I have a lot of respect for anybody, especially someone who starts their own small business from scratch. I have a friend that I knew in high school who started her own business from scratch at a very young age and turned it into something very, very successful. So I have a huge amount of respect for what she accomplished there, because it's not easy, and you have to really be driven and focused and have some good luck along the way. So it's just hard. So I have a lot of respect for especially those who started on their own.
All right, let's end on a high note. What's the most fun thing you've ever got to spend money on a personal level that you've brought in? Whether something you've purchased, a vacation you've been on, like what has been I finally did this. This is awesome.
I don't, I would love to just say that, hey, I hit this milestone, so I bought this thing and it made it all worthwhile. But I would just say that, I've been very fortunate along the way for a long time, had a lot of great vacations. I eat well and I drink well and I vacation well. And that's my reward. And I'm very lucky in my home life, and I have a great home life in spite of the crazy hours, in spite of all the stress and everything else that goes along with it. I think I'm very, very fortunate.
I thought you were going to say your private plane,
Yes, I'm still working towards
your yacht.
the yacht, the private plane, and the Ferrari. I'm hoping to buy it as a package deal at some point. So
I think there's a discount if you buy all 3 at the
I
same
think there
time.
is, yes. It's a 3-for-1 type of program. So I'm still aspiring to that. Yeah, the one thing I forgot to mention when you asked me like what the keys are, time management. That's that's a huge thing. Time management. You can't buy more hours. You can buy another machine, you can buy another employee, but you cannot buy more hours in a day. And more important than ever, because as a small business owner, you've got your phone, you've got your email, you've got walk-in custom, you've just got it coming at you from every direction, and you don't have time to think, and you have to be able to block time out and say, I'm going to work on this project or work on that project. Otherwise, you just never get anything done, which I'm sure
Very
you can
true.
relate to.
Very true.
Squeeze that in somewhere.
I will.